Authors Hour. There, got the microphone at a better height. My name is Fred Zurm, and I represent the Friends of the Chicago Writers Center. We're a group that aims to encourage writers in writing on the institution grounds and beyond by supporting and also supplementing the activities of the institution's Writers Center. Every week, we sponsor some activities to do that. One is the Authors Hour, which you're at now, 12:15 every Thursday. We spotlight local writers, Chicagoans. On Sundays at 5 o'clock up in the second floor in the prose room, we have an open mic for writers and listeners 18 years old or older. On Tuesdays at 1:15, right after the poetry brown bag, we have an informal critique session. You bring about 5 copies of one page of poetry or prose, and a published writer will guide, facilitate a group critique. At halftime, I'll talk about some of the special yearly activities we sponsor. But for now, let's get to the reason we're here, which is to listen to our authors. First will be Patricia Averbach, a native Clevelander. She is a former director of the Chicago Writers Center. She is the author of 2 novels, Painting Bridges in 2013 and Resurrecting Rain in 2020. The latter novel was a 2019 finalist for Chanticleer's Somerset Award for Contemporary Fiction and was also a semi-finalist for a Tucson Festival of Books Literary Award and a second place winner of the Florida Writers Association's Royal Palm Literary Awards. She also writes poetry, and her poetry chapbook, Missing Persons, won the London-based Lumen Camden Prize and was cited by Times of London Literary Supplement as one of the best small collections of the year. I didn't see that. She has just completed a 3rd novel, a work of magical realism set in Toronto, titled Duplicity. Patricia Averbach.
Thank you. I'm going to read from my last published novel, Resurrecting Rain, and then I'm going to read a couple pages from the unpublished novel, Duplicity, that I've just finished, but which has not found a publisher yet. Resurrecting Rain is about a woman, Dina, who grew up on a dysfunctional commune outside of Santa Fe, and all Dina wanted was a normal life. But after her husband loses their house, their savings, and the kids' college funds, her life becomes anything but normal. What will emerge from the financial wreckage and damaged marriage? Can losing a house lead you home? So Dina has created the life she's always wanted. She lives in a kind of upscale neighborhood. She's got a nice job. Her husband has a good job. She has 2 great children. And then a financial disaster, a terrible investment, makes everything go south. And her marriage kind of falls apart. One thing after another disintegrates. And so she is actually facing homelessness. And she is desperate to find a place to live with the very dwindling funds she still has available. So this is her last gasp at finding a place to live. The sun was pouring through her bedroom window the next time she woke up. The night terrors were gone, and she felt optimistic that the house on Prospect might be the one. It was already 9 o'clock. But Prospect was only a short walk away. She put on her best slacks, a fresh white blouse, low-heeled pumps, and the gold-stud earrings Martin had given her for their 15th anniversary. She licked out the last drop from a container of strawberry yogurt then set out in better spirits than she'd experienced in quite a while. The walk was a little longer than she'd expected, but the morning was beautiful and she moved at a good clip. First past the tiny bungalows and corner shops that hadn't yet succumbed to gentrification, then across Mound and onto Orange, where large houses stood protected behind fences of stucco and wrought iron. Between the houses, Dina caught a glimpse of Sarasota Bay lapping at the back of the manicured yards. She turned at Prospect and began checking the numbers on the houses she walked past. The address in her hand could not be right. She checked it again, and then a third time before accepting that she had arrived at her destination. An enormous Italianate structure set behind an imposing wall of weathered stone. Dina felt intimidated. The place was a mansion, but she squared her shoulders, climbed the steps onto a portico supported by huge Corinthian columns, and rang the bell. Several minutes went by with no answer, so she rang again, checked her watch, then looked around in confusion. No one's home. I should have told you to come around back. I only use the place in the winter. A short, stubby man with oily black hair approached on a paved walk that led to the backyard. Follow me, it's in the back. I got it all opened up for you. She couldn't gauge his age, probably 40-something, but he might have been older or younger. His t-shirt had deep sweat stains under the armpits. Dina eyed him warily. Are you the rental agent? Do I look like a rental agent? It's a sublet. I can't afford the place anymore, so I gotta let it go. It's real nice and cheap for the neighborhood. You're gonna love it. He turned and headed back the way he'd come. Dina hesitated a moment and followed him around the corner to where a pink stucco bungalow surrounded by flowering bougainvillea sat at the rear of the spacious lot. It had its own small porch supported by white columns, replicas of the ones on the main house, and a large picture window with a view of the garden. There was no way in God's green earth this place rented for $500 a month. The man was standing on the porch holding the front door open. Come on, I got another lady coming at 11. You want to see it or don't you? What the hell? Dina thought to herself. I might as well take a look. As soon as she stepped inside, her nose was accosted by the smell of garbage. The living room was strewn with pizza boxes, beer bottles, and dirty clothes. Giant flies buzzed at the window. A tire and an old bicycle pump were leaning incongruously against a white leather sofa. A flat screen TV sat on the floor. Damaged plaster and loose wires dangled from the wall where it had previously been installed. I'll be taking the TV with me. The rest of the stuff stays. $500 and it's yours. I could be out of here by tomorrow. You want to look around? Dina took a step backwards toward the door. No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have bothered you. It's lovely, but I'm afraid it's out of my price range. The man bolted to the front door as she turned to leave. He leaned against it, blocking her way. His expression was still affable, but its chill ran down Dina's spine. She noticed the doorknob and lock disassembled on the floor by his feet. Tell you what, I really need to get out of here, so how about $450? We got a deal? Dina tried to smile pleasantly. Well, that's a great offer, but there are a couple more places I want to look at first. How about if I give you a call in the morning? Hey, you haven't even seen the place yet. You want to see the bedroom? It's got a king-size bed and its own bathroom. No, thank you. I would like to go now. Dina tried to move past him toward the open door. The man didn't move. He just stared at her. She could feel him sizing her up. Tell you what, I'm going to need a deposit to hold this place until tomorrow. How much you got on you? I don't want the house. I just want to go. Will you please let me out the door? Dina's legs had gone wobbly and there was a tremor in her voice. She tried smiling again, but her face had frozen. A large hand suddenly reached out and snatched her shoulder bag with such force that she was thrown off balance. She stumbled forward, falling against the man's chest. He leered at her as she righted herself and stepped away from him. He opened her purse and pawed through it, scrambling her lipstick, blush, keys, a pen, a wad of Kleenex. He was playing with her. She held her breath, afraid to move or make a sound. He found her cell phone, examined it and nodded approvingly before sticking it in his pocket. At last, he pulled out her wallet and quickly and efficiently relieved it of her debit card and all her cash, about $115, before handing the purse back to her. That should hold the house until tomorrow. You just give me a call when you've made up your mind. Then he miraculously stepped aside and let her flee across the lawn and back to the street, where she retraced her steps without slowing down or looking back until she reached Andor's apartment, where she raced up the steps, locked the door, and sat panting at the kitchen table for several minutes before bursting into tears. Worthy. I'm going to read a couple pages from the unpublished novel. It's called Duplicity. It's my third and still unpublished novel. It's a Canadian novel, a Canadian book that involves two protagonists, two timelines, twins, double vision, double dealing, and one magic boat. Jacob, one of my protagonists, is an 84-year-old retired archaeologist with double vision, tremors, and declining cognitive function. He's mourning his recently deceased wife, Bessie, and trying to convince his son that he's not ready for assisted living. He wanders down to Toronto's waterfront, where he's given a free ticket to sail on the maiden voyage of the Aqua Meridian. He thinks he's going for a short harbor cruise, but the ship is larger than it looks, and time is slippery on the water. This is Jacob. The key I was given at customer service opens the door to a well-appointed cubicle with a porthole that looks out on nothing but water. I try the bed and find it more than satisfactory. There's a built-in chest, a comfortable chair, and a bedside table where I place Dr. Rabinowitz's book. I peek into the bathroom and glimpse a walk-in shower and a vanity supplied with soap and little bottles of shampoos and lotions. There's even a toothbrush and a small tube of toothpaste. Very considerate. They've really made an effort. When I open the closet to stow my hat, I'm surprised to find a pair of white cotton pajamas and a terry cloth robe, all bearing the ship's logo. This is really astonishing. They've thought of everything. Out of curiosity, I open a dresser drawer and discover neat piles of sport shirts, slacks, and shorts in various colors. I unfold one of the shirts to check the size and find that it looks about right. Another drawer contains fresh underwear and socks still in their original packaging. I sit down in the armchair to think about what all this means. It's too extraordinary. It's simply too much. Even the best hotels don't provide clothing for their guests. Or maybe they do. Bessie and I never stayed in a truly first-class hotel, so who knows? This might be quite normal and expected in the upper echelons. But I have an uneasy feeling that it isn't. Besides, I'm in tourist class. What do they provide first-class passengers? Ball gowns and evening jackets? I check another drawer where I find a swimsuit and beach towels emblazoned with the Aqua Meridian logo. I stare at them for a long minute before reaching out to touch one of the towels. It's a soft terry cloth, like I expect you'd find in the best hotels. I close the drawer, wondering if I'll have the nerve to put on the suit and look for a pool tomorrow. I go into the bathroom, intending to throw some cold water on my face and comb my hair before joining Dawson in the lounge. But as soon as I catch sight of myself in the mirror, I freeze. The face in the mirror is familiar, but not one I ever expected to see again. Gathering my courage, I lean forward to examine myself more closely. There's almost no light in the bathroom, but still, it's not my imagination. I look years younger than when I woke up this morning. I touch my face and feel the skin, smooth and resilient. It's not just the trick of the light. My eyes are clear and my hair shows just a hint of gray. Is this the face that Dawson's been looking at all afternoon? I raise my eyebrows, wink, and stick out my tongue. The face works, but my knees have gone a bit wobbly. I lie down on the bed and close my eyes. I wish Bessie were here with me now, or even my son, Michael. No, not Michael. I wouldn't want him to see me like this. It's not right for a father to look younger than his son. Should I mention this transformation to someone? What would I say? I may look like a man in his prime, but I'm really an old codger. How would that go over? Not well, I expect. I open my eyes and examine my hands. They're small for a man, but suddenly well-muscled and strong, not veiny and knobbed by arthritis. They're the hands I remember digging shards of pottery from the ruins of Crete, holding the tiller steady when we sailed, cupping Bessie's breasts at night in bed. They were good hands, and here they are again, only now. I stagger to the porthole and look out. There's nothing but rain and endless water in all directions. Where the hell am I? Is this some sort of trick? Someone's idea of a practical joke? An idea strikes me and I go back to the bathroom to examine the mirror more closely. It seems perfectly normal. And besides, what trick mirror would explain my hands? As I stare at the good-looking pillow in the glass, my nerves begin to settle and my knees stop shaking. He looks so confident and self-possessed that I have to smile at him. He smiles back and I feel reassured. My initial alarm gives way to gratitude for this unexpected gift. Maybe it's the light, maybe it's my eyes, or maybe my mind is going. It doesn't matter. My heart stops racing. I take a few deep breaths and decide to enjoy this newfound prowess while it lasts. What else is there to do? Here's looking at you, kid, I say to my reflection. Then I stride out into the corridor to look for Dawson in the smoking lounge. I'm afraid this is the only copy of the book I have with me, but if by some good fortune, one of you would like one, they do have them in the bookstore. And some of my my other novel is available. It's also available as a Kindle. Okay. Thank you.
As Patricia made it clear, books are available from both authors after the reading. Just a word about the special events that the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center sponsors. We have 2 left this season. This coming Wednesday, the 27th at 5 o'clock in the Hall of Philosophy. Selected Chautauquans will be reading their favorite poem and briefly explaining why that poem means so much to them. July 31st is the final day for entering the annual writing contest. That's open to writers of all ages, both prose and poetry. To find out more about these activities or any other activities of the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center, you should go online, as you do for most things these days, at www.chq.org, then /FCWC. Our next author is Henry Tank Danielson. He has such an extensive biography and rich life that I'm just going to hit some highlights. He was born in Jamestown, New York, grew up in Lakewood, and attended Grove City, Pennsylvania College. After graduation, he married his high school sweetheart, Julie, who had just graduated from SUNY Rockport. After a short time in Pittsburgh, both of them joined the Peace Corps and were off to Malawi, Central Africa. After they finished their stint in the Peace Corps, they cashed in their airline tickets and instead found passage on a ship around the world, which foreshadowed their future travels. They came back to Western New York Hank taught English at Jamestown High School. Julie taught chemistry at Southwestern Central High School. They sailed quite a bit, but with retirement, they sort of upped the ante. They took on a challenge to sail across the Atlantic, million feet. Since then, they have done extensive sailing to Bermuda, the Azores, the coast of England, Portugal, Spain, Italy, France, Greece, Turkey, Cyprus, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Egypt, and also the Black Sea coast of Turkey. Today in retirement, they still enjoy small boats. During their life, they've endured many challenges together, and they feel they have been truly blessed. Hank Danielson, come forward.
Thank you very much, Fred. I appreciate that. Yes, I'm going to be reading several sections from the book called Island People, the Greek Isles, and the Amazing Middle East. One of the things we did when in our sailing is we did get to the Mediterranean, and when we got to the Mediterranean, we sailed all the way to the eastern end, and we joined the EMIR, the Eastern Mediterranean Yacht Rally. And we were together with 88 boats all together, and another couple from this area, Bruce and Jody Erickson, joined us, and we sailed those places. I'm going to read you a little of one of those visits that we had there. Chapter 10, Latakia, Syria, before the storm. Now, this was in 2008, and of course, the revolution in Turkey came, or in Syria came after that. As I look back on my notes from the Syrian part of the cruise, I realized profound change has happened. Some of the places we visited have since been destroyed. The government has brought chemical weapons on its own people. There have been bombings, huge civilian losses. I cringe when I hear of it. First of all, Syria appears somewhat different than Turkey, in that it looks flat from the sea rather than mountainous. But here's the story. Our arrival in the port of Latakia was easy. Though we had to wait a short time in the harbor, we found our way to a modern marina and moored stern to. There was water and electricity available, but harbor fees were high, especially for the few catamarans in the rally, which were charged by the square meter. That first night, there was a dinner in a local restaurant. There were salads and kebab, lamb or mutton, and dessert. We'd been up all night the night before. It was not a wild party by any means. Although there was live entertainment, there was little dancing. Early the next morning, we boarded buses for the first day of tours. Our first stop was Le Crêt du Chevalier, a Crusader castle built on a major trade route from the Med through the snow-capped mountains of Lebanon, visible in the distance. The castle itself is magnificent. Built by Catholic Crusaders in the 12th century, it took 160 years to build, and when finished, was never conquered. There was an outer moat, a steep wall, an inner moat, and a second wall. There were provisions of food, wine, and water, enough, according to our guide, to keep 2,000 people safe inside for 5 years. Imagine that. The entrance was a drawbridge with a corridor leading in several directions. One led to a precipitous drop to the rocks beneath. Another led to a second gate, over which were apertures where boiling oil could be poured on those beneath, while they were peppered with thousands of arrows. Although its walls were never successfully breached, Saladin's army of 8,000 men did cause the 200 to 300 man Crusader force there at the time to surrender in exchange for safe passage to the sea, with all they could carry. The castle was beautiful design and a World Heritage Site. The size and the majesty of the edifice was stunning. Sadly, the beautiful castle, said by some to be the most magnificent ever built, has been bombed in the recent revolution and nearly destroyed. Efforts are underway to restore it, but it'll be a momentous task. From there, we continued to Palmyra. Palmyra, another World Heritage Site, is an oasis, literally, in the Syrian desert. Parched by ground, the desert is barren and dusty. The bus bounced along in the undulating road. The heat was oppressive, and there ahead was a flush of green where a forest of palm trees flourished. We stopped for lunch in a Bedouin tent. They roasted a sheep, which we ate in the hot shelter of the tent. And then there was the ruin. Palmyra was named by Alexander, and the sandstone city he built there was simply beautiful against the bright blue sky. Typical of Greek cities, there was the bath, the theater, the agora or market, and the residential district stretching before us. Devastated by earthquakes, the city's columns stood in a ruin that truly captured the imagination. The temple of Bel, or Baal, dominated the scene. One might remember references to Baal worship in the Bible. Here was a religious center where animals were sacrificed to the god Baal. Interestingly, sacrifices were made at the temple by families on special occasions, and meat of the land sacrificed was eaten at a feast by invited guests. It was a way of thanking God and enjoying the plenty he provided at the same time. Sadly, during the 2011 revolution, terrorists who wanted all history they did not approve of removed, captured and did what they could to destroy Palmyra. Statues were smashed, ruins were leveled, but thanks to gifts from others, there was an attempt to rebuild and reopen this World Heritage Site. After wandering through this magnificent ruin in the hot sun for several hours, we boarded our buses again and headed for Damascus, reportedly the oldest city in the world at over 4,000. It's first mentioned in Egyptian literature in the 15th century BCE, and in chapters 14 and 15 in Genesis. Very large car dealers greeted us as we entered the city. From BMW to Mercedes and Subaru, the dealership sometimes showed as many as 20 vehicles in glass-walled showrooms. Traffic was heavy and our bus weaved like a sports car through the crowded streets. Finally, we arrived at our hotel, a 5-star, where we had just 20 minutes to prepare for dinner. The restaurant was a theme park. Aladdin's castle dominated the scene with a Dutch windmill and the Tower of Pisa vying for second place. We ate under the stars in front of a huge stage. Dinner was a stream of salads and sauces, followed by meat and more vegetables. Afterward, there was a live rendition of 1001 Arabian Nights. Unfortunately, the music was so loud, it literally hurt our ears. No alcohol was available. The dancing was excellent, but it was so loud, appropriate or not, we decided to leave at the intermission. Next morning, we visited the Damascus Museum, and according to our guide, it was nearly as large as the British Museum. Very impressive. Inside was an excavated synagogue with frescoes of Old Testament Bible stories depicted on walls, the only one like it in existence. Also, the tomb from Palmyra was on display, carefully excavated and moved to the museum intact. Next, we took a walk through the covered bazaar or souk, where one could buy everything from inlaid boxes to lovely wedding dresses, Victoria's Secret underwear and jewelry of all kinds. I remember a group of Muslim women, heads covered, draped in dark clothing, looking in the window at Victoria's Secret underwear, displayed on rather voluptuous mannequins. At the end of the souk, near the remains of the Temple of Jupiter, was the Damascus Mosque. In order to enter, the ladies wore full cover, and we men removed our shoes before we went inside. It was immense, with marble in the courtyard and colorful oriental carpets inside. It was the largest mosque in the world, 350 meters by 200 meters. A major attraction of the mosque is the head of John the Baptist, which is encased in an open tomb, enveloped in green glass, and peered at by everyone. While we were there, we saw a group from Iran in attendance in full black cover. They were literally crying about something that happened 1,000 years before, causing a split in the Islamic religion. We couldn't be there during a service, but interestingly there, the carpets point south, not east. Mecca is south of Damascus. Later, we walked and shopped among the narrow streets of the old city. Inlay and Damascus silk were expensive and of varying quality. We found those living in the city to be pleasant and friendly. American, they would say, and when I concurred that we were from the U.S., they displayed a kind of warmth. I remember a man in a furniture store showing us tables made locally that made me remember my grandfather and his business of building tables. Of course, our guide took us to shops that paid him, but there was little there that interested us. I wonder, was this part of Damascus bombed, turned to rubble during the revolution? Were these kind people maimed, killed? What a terrible thought. It was a 4-hour bus ride back to Metropolis. At 8 the following morning, we were off on another bus to Aleppo, one of the oldest continually inhabited cities in the world, and the huge Muslim castle there. Like ancient cities, the story of castles and their domination repeats itself. Giant walls, a huge moat, crumbling ruins inside. It was never captured, but saw a great deal of action during the Crusades. It was the home of the Sultan. His room has been restored, and it's impressive. Visitors had to pass many gates with guards at the ready, and when they were finally admitted, they stared at a huge window. The light blinded them after walking through the dark castle, but the Sultan could see the faces of the visitors clearly. There were holes through the floors of this giant room so that guards could view various approaches and know about trouble before they were confronted with it. Right around the corner were the rooms set aside for his harem. A troop of local Boy and Girl Scouts was touring the castle at the same time we were. They sang and carried banners, a colorful diversion, but they were challenging for our guide. The city of Aleppo is 4,000 years old and is surrounded by a wall built with the Greeks, with Damascus, it vies with Damascus as the oldest city in the world. Sadly, Aleppo too was to be badly damaged in the ongoing revolution. On May 3rd, we had a half-day tour of the castle of Salamis. It is the top of a mountain, and to isolate it, the Crusaders dug a 40-meter-high trench through solid rock. The task took 60 years. 2 stops on the way back were fascinating. Ugrit is the site of an excavation of 5 ancient civilizations dating from the 16th to 13th centuries BCE. Huge cyclops rocks were found at the base and smaller rocks on top. When the Greeks arrived, they built on the mounds of previous civilizations. We visited a tomb there and walked through the streets of the ancient city. Finally, we stopped at the city of Homs, near where ancient wheels driven by the current of the river lifted water to a system of aqueducts high above. The wheels are 2,000 years old, made of mulberry wood, and groan loudly as they lift and spill their water to the troughs above. Of course, the wheels have been repaired from time to time, but we were assured that all 17 of them were original. It's had a new handle, perhaps a new head, but it's the same old original axe. Heard that before. With their constant motion, splashing water and groaning, they were one of the more entertaining parts of the tour. Temperatures had risen well into the 90s by then, so a little mist in the air was refreshing. Interestingly, our guide for part of the tour was a senior college professor who was a Syrian tour guide in the off-season. He confided with us how terrifying the American invasion of Iraq was to him. He alluded to the American killing machine, and when I insisted that American troops are careful to attack only military targets, he shook his head. He was sure those defending Iraq were conscripted, made to do so. He feared that Bashar al-Assad, the unpopular dictator of Syria, would be the next American target, and that Syrian young people would be forced to defend the state and be slaughtered by the Americans. I never thought of it that way. And of course, that's not what happened at all. The Syrian war was a homegrown revolution that devastated the country, part of the Arab Spring. Back at the marina, we turned in our visitor passes, picked up our passports, and waited for the greasy fuel truck as it passed from dock to dock to fill our tank. At €1 per liter, or $5.92 a gallon, it was the cheapest diesel fuel we had seen by far. That evening, a refreshing onshore wind came up and drove us about 5 knots for over 2 years. The following morning, the Med was glassy with the mainsail hung listlessly on the mast and the engine purred. The flag of Lebanon flew over the quarantine flag in the rigging, and we formed a single line 6 miles from the coast until we were directly opposite Beirut Harbor, where we made a left turn, single file. We headed for the country. That was the Emir, and that's with 88 boats and our crew. But Julie and I did the next part. 2 years later, we headed up past through the Dardanelles and past Gallipoli, past Troy, up into the Sea of Marmara, through the Sea of Marmara, up the Bosphorus, stopping in Istanbul. We went into the Black Sea. Now, the Black Sea, of course, you've heard, is where Ukraine is. It is where the USSR is. But our insurance said, no, Henry, only the coast of Turkey as far as Sinai. So we did. And we are here at Pylos and Curacao. We motored and sailed to Pylos, a new harbor built in the last few years, but not on the charts or in the pilots. We found a depth of 3 meters in the center and anchored there. It was shallow, but large and afforded excellent protection from all directions. As it was calm, we took the dinghy and rowed to shore, leaving it tied to a small dock. We found the town very different from Ereğli. Where Ereğli was clean and manicured with parks and statues, carefully trimmed bushes and gardens, Pylos was unfinished. There was a waterfront park, but it was weeds, not grass, not mowed. There were some new buildings, but many were old in a state of disrepair. One hotel had broken windows, there was litter around. We tried to find a market to stock up on fresh food, but the only one we found was all dry goods. We bought some paper towels. The lady at the cash register who spoke not a word of English wore a t-shirt that said in bold print, cute, rich, and available. I doubt she understood what it said. We found a restaurant on the beach and ordered fish, potatoes, and salad. We got a huge test, saw a salad, a plate of French fries, and perhaps 2 dozen small fish, deep fried and tasty. There was one young lady in the restaurant who spoke some English. After lunch, we asked her if there was a market in town where we could purchase fresh produce. She said she could not give directions, but told us to wait. We saw her walk out the door and run across the street to where a man was working on a tractor in a field. She waved to him. He drove the tractor over to her, stopped, and gave her something, which turned out to be car keys. Then she returned. After we paid for our lunch, she asked us to follow her. She took us to a small car and said, "Get in." Then she drove us a few blocks to a wonderful market with fruits and vegetables and meat, as well as canned goods. She wanted to wait for us and take us back, but we wouldn't have it. We offered her a tip, but she pushed money away. It was a short walk to the dinghy. The faces of these towns may change, but the people have remained kind and generous. We were deeply moved by her kindness. Off to the east, on top of a hill about a mile away, was an imposing wall, obviously part of an ancient fortification. Late in the afternoon, we hiked over toward it. There we followed a steep path up the hill. At the top, we found that the fortress had been restored. Some of the walls had been rebuilt, fresh mortar, but other parts were still carefully laid blocks of stone with no mortar. Recent digging had uncovered other walls, carefully draped with plastic sheets to preserve them. 2 police officers were there as well, watching over the area. One doesn't casually pick up anything such as this. The Turks, like the Greeks, have learned their lesson. We took a road back toward the harbor, and along the way found an ancient Greek amphitheater, barely discernible on the hillside facing the sea. It was not in any way restored, but each shape told us what it was. What plays were acted there, we wondered. Who might have sat in those seats? It was also part of an ancient Roman aqueduct. We re-entered the town from the top of the hill where some old apartment buildings overlooked the sea. Back near the dock where we had left the dinghy, there was a rousing soccer game going on between 2 teams in uniform. The stands were filled with cheering spectators. Farther down the beach, there was a cage with 6 trampolines inside, filled with bouncing adolescents. We watched a dozen men launch a new fiberglass outboard boat from the back of a dump truck using rollers and a winch. They tipped the truck and carefully moved the boat back into the water without damaging it. It was Saturday night, and everyone was out to have a good time. The next morning, when we left Pylos, we were surprised to find winds gusting at over 17 miles an hour, and they were favorable. We got sail up right away, and by 6:45, we found ourselves gushing along right on course at 7+ knots. But like all good things, the wind shifted and then dropped, and we ended up motoring 20 of the 30-some miles to Curacao. What an interesting harbor. It was a town of boat builders. There were several shops in this little town, and all that they did was build boats. Lumber was shipped in as tree trunks and milled right at the small factories there. It was sawed to rough planks and dried, then cut to dimension. Huge bandsaws and shapers and planers, along with power electric tools, were used to shape the boards before they were fastened in place. Both hardwood and pine was used. It was fascinating to watch. Keels were laid on the ground and ribs fastened to them. They were built right side up with no jig to hold parts in place. Then the ribs were extended by bolting longer pieces to the original. There never seemed to be a plan anywhere that I could find, but the hulls were simply beautiful with compound curves, sweeping chines leading to high bows and graceful sterns. They were smooth and tight when they were finished. In addition to partially decked fishing boats of around 25 feet, there were small cruisers as well, complete with bright interiors, beautifully painted and varnished. They were all power boats and all powered by 1 or 2 cylinder diesel engines. Sometimes the engine had a transmission, but often it was direct drive, meaning the captain rowed the boat away from the dock and then started the engine to take him on his fishing grounds. Sometimes the engines were water cooled with wet exhaust, but often they were air cooled with simple pipe carrying exhaust and noise to the air. We were welcome wherever we went in the yards, and we enjoyed watching these men build beautiful boats. Along with their power tools, these people enjoyed some traditional methods as well. There was always a fire of sawdust and shavings burning outside near where they did the planking. They sprinkled water on a board that needed to be bent, then held it over the fire until it was very hot and steaming. Then they clamped it in place on the frames, bent and fastened it. They were skilled craftsmen and ready to fun to watch. Ours was the only fiberglass boat in the harbor as far as we could see. It was wonderful to watch these craftsmen building beautiful boats from local, renewable materials. Even though it was Sunday, these men worked till after 6 in the evening. As we walked through the streets, a man called us in English. He invited us for a cup of tea in his shop where he provided tea for the community. Then he told us he was married to a girl named Victoria from Los Angeles. He showed us her picture. She was blonde and attractive. He was understandably very emotional about this woman, his wife. Unfortunately, he could not get a visa to the U.S., and she could not return to Turkey, so the romance was over. His brother worked in casinos in the U.S., and he called him so we could speak with him on the phone. We did visit, but the whole situation was totally out of our experience. Sadly, there was nothing we could do to help him. What a heartrending story. After dinner that evening, a family came by the boat with 3 young girls and a dog. The older girl, about 12, asked a few questions in English. She was eager and polite, and we invited her and her family aboard Tapestry. Dad lifted the girls aboard, but he and his wife, in traditional Muslim dress, refused to step on deck. The girls, however, eagerly came below, just beaming. They looked in the cabins and the hen, admired the galley, turned the wheel, and then climbed the ladder to the cockpit, where Dad lifted them back on the pier. There were smiles all around and lots of thank yous. It was another magic moment. Somehow our common humanity suddenly outweighed our cultural differences. These are wonderful children in awe. They loved the experience of being aboard, and we truly enjoyed having them there. I thought I had heard a new noise coming from the propeller shaft, so as the day was hot and the water in the harbor clean, I took my first swim of the year. Happily, the water was warm and the prop and shaft were tight and fine. The feathering prop feathered as it should. Everything was good. Thank you.
Thank you, Hank and Pat. I think you've left us with an appetite to read more, and books are available up here. I just wanted to alert you to a couple upcoming literary events. That tomorrow, the prose writer in residence, Vigino, will be giving her brown bag lecture. Next week at the Authors Hour, poet Carol Jennings will be reading from her book, The Sustained Pedal, and young fiction fantasy writer Robin Page will be reading from a variety of her books. I hope you'll consider rejoining us then. Thank you for coming today. Enjoy the rest of your day.